Hello, everybody. Welcome to the next episode in the Squat Success podcast. Really excited today. We've got a very special guest with us, Kaival from Kana Dental Health. Kaival has been a good friend. We actually started in the same practice many years ago, both as associates. And then I think Kaival left after my first year. It's when you bought your first practice, wasn't it?
You drove me out, Bobby. That's all it was.
But I don't know. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It really is a pleasure.
Yeah, no, great. So, Kaival, obviously, a lot of people in the profession know who you are these days. But for the ones that don't, do you want to give a bit of an introduction?
Yeah, so my name's Kaival. Together with my wife, Shrina, we own the Kana Health Group, which is a group of practices in Milton Keynes and Bedford. So we've got 5 sites now, and also a training academy based in Milton Keynes. So 5 quite large sites, about 29 chairs, 130-ish people, team members within us. And the first practice was in 2015, and the last one was probably about 18 months ago or so. So itchy to go.
Yeah.
But that's us in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, awesome. And it's all happened in a pretty short space of time, hasn't it? It's not been that long.
Yeah, for me it feels long, because it's been that sort of 10 years, and we're not, we're not a group that is constantly, pushing to acquire. We're trying to find the right size, right sites that fit into our portfolio, our model. That sort of thing. We had our first place in 2015, second in 2017, and then the third was 2021, and then the last 2 a couple of years later around it. So yeah, it seems all quite spread out. Although the first 2 we had kids at the same time. So I think the running joke was every practice you're gonna have a kid at the same time. So fortunately that didn't happen.
How many did you get up to?
We're on about 17 no. I've got 3 kids at the moment. 10
So you still got scope for more there.
No, I've moved next door, Bobby, just in case.
Oh no, brilliant! Thanks for that introduction, Kaival. So, one of the things that we really wanted to discuss today was there is a huge amount of debate, and one of the biggest questions that I get asked is, do I set up a squat or do I buy my own practice? Yeah. So I thought it'd be great to have a open and frank discussion today, because you've got yourself who's bought multiple practices, you've got yourself who's got a squat and help other dentists setting up squats. Yeah. So I thought we could have a really great discussion and give a huge amount of value and knowledge to dentists out there who are about to go into their practice ownership journey. So if we just rewind all the way back to when we were at Aradi, then what made you first want to go into practice ownership then at that point?
I think I always had that little bit of an itch in me to have my own business, and I think we both worked under a chap called Rescue, and he was really entrepreneurial. He was a big mentor, I think, to both of us, and really quite open about the business side of things and how the business side would work. And I think he always knew that probably both of us and a few others that we'd have those aspirations to own a business one day. He was really open. We used to talk quite freely about it, which was really nice. And so I think, I worked there for 2009 till for quite a while, probably close to when we bought the first practice. But when I was getting married to Shrina, who's also a dentist, and this is not how I suggest you go about things, but it was almost the done thing to do. Husband and wife dentists, what do? You own a practice. Even when we go to family barbecues and these sort of things, it'll be, oh, so what do you do? You're a dentist. Oh, so do you have a practice? The very first question is that. And so we thought, well, we're both in it, and we're gonna let's have a look into that. So actually, we were potentially going to buy our first practice 2012, and it was due to complete 2 weeks before we were getting married. So at the actual wedding day. So it was going through that process. Didn't quite transpire because the chap who was selling it, he was actually setting up another practice nearby and trying to move his patients over to that new site. And just at D-Day, we sort of decided we're going to buy this practice, big chunk of change for the goodwill. and this is probably what we'll come to later on as well. But we're not going to have any goodwill on day one, and we're going to spend the rest of our lives trying to build it up. So we pulled out right at the last minute. And then we probably looked for numerous practices between 2012 and 2015. Finally found the one, the first practice, Oxford House. Even with that one, though, we didn't get it straight away. We put an offer in, it was rejected, and they went with somebody else. And it was going through that process. And I was sitting there on holiday with Shrina, and I just felt that this was the place. I was really shocked we didn't get it, and it felt right. And I remember messaging the seller on holiday. I just said, let me just message, see how it's going. And they came back to me and said, well, actually, the people that are buying it are pulling out. I think it was to do with funding. I'm not entirely sure. So I really quickly got on the phone to the bank and said, look, I need a letter to say we're good for the money, we're good to get it going, send it over to them. And actually we ended up getting the practice as a result of that. So and just in terms of hindsight and these sort of things and how things work out, if we hadn't have gone through that process in 2012 with the bank, we wouldn't have been that quick and ready to go for the next one. So that's how it sort of kicked off.
Yeah, so it's it's fantastic to hear that. So it's really interesting how things work out, isn't it? It was almost like it was meant to be in the end.
Yeah,
and you had that gut feeling that it was the right one, and then it ended up working out for you.
Yeah, luck. A lot of this will always come down to luck and these sort of things. So I know they say you make your luck, but there's definitely a lot of luck in the game as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. Luck. Often people say you make your own luck, but I'm a strong believer it doesn't help to be prepared.
Yeah.
But the more prepared you are, then the luckier you can be.
Absolutely,
and the quicker you can act. So like you said there, you had all that work done in the background anyway, which meant you were more prepared anyway.
Yeah, we're ready to go.
Yeah, fantastic. And then after you bought that first practice then, as it was the first one that you'd ever bought, what was the biggest things that you struggled with right from the beginning?
So the practice had been established for a long time, 20, 30 years before us. We had the ex-owners in the place, and all the dentists were towards the latter part of their career, and then there's me, and I've been buzzing to buy a practice for this long. I'd just done an implant MSc, and my plan for the place was to add implants. It wasn't really doing much of it. It wasn't doing anything higher end. I bought a CBCT during the due diligence phase because I was so excited to just
before you'd even complete
it. It was there, it was ready, and it was ready to be installed.
Wow!
And so I rock up on week one basically, and was trying to install the CBCT, and the practice had just not experienced any change for that long, and I'm there like a bull in a china shop, and I think that was the big lessons for me is you can be really uber keen, but you've got to gauge the practice, you've got to gauge the feel. And actually you need people on board with that vision. And I think what happened was, the dentists there were great. They're really good dentists, established patient space, but actually they weren't, we weren't aligned with what we wanted to do. So it took me a long, long time to gain the courage to figure out that actually I need to have these conversations, and it's a big place, it's a 7-surgery place. Shrina and I hadn't ever, done anything in terms of the business of dentistry. We were trying to learn how to, order things and pay people and deal with people, wages and team members and all these sort of things. And I was, we were so enthusiastic. I was really enthusiastic, but these guys just weren't on that same page. And I think it took a while to figure out, okay, well, we need to get people on side. We need to have a vision. We need to believe in our vision and be able to have those conversations with people to actually start implementing it. But I think the biggest lesson was that discrepancy between what we wanted and what they are used to.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. So, a lot of the advice we give to other dentists who are buying practices from not setting up squats but purchasing them, they often ask, what do we do when we take over? And the simple answer is nothing. For the first 3 months, just watch, learn, observe, get to know the team, and then start to figure things out off the back of that. And I think that's pretty sound advice.
And I think the biggest part of that is also the communication of that fact. So what we do now is when we're acquiring and when we take over, we'll say to them, do you know what? There's loads of things that we'll probably learn from you guys. And so for 3 months, maybe 6 months, we're just going to observe, see what's happening. Unless there's something, really intrinsic that we have to change really quickly. But actually we're going to observe, and actually we might take on some of the stuff that you're doing and drop it into the other practices. But at the same point, when it hits 3 months, when it hits 6 months, we're going to get you all around. We're going to have a conversation and say, look, these are the things that we might want to look to change. How do you feel about it? This is how we've done it in the past, and this is how we know it works. And these are maybe the issues that we might come across, and so on. And I think it's just having that open communication, and you'll find, in that first conversation, like, if there's people that are just not on board and they're never going to be on board, they'll probably leave quite soon afterwards. And then there'll be the early adopters that might be cool with it after 3 months, and so on. So you have those different stages. But I think, again, with the first practice, we just didn't do that. It took 2 years to muster the courage to start doing that. And that's what we've learned quite quickly, is you've got to be true to yourself. And actually that's where you get your enjoyment. Because I used to find that I used to really dread going to work. My own practice. I used to dread going to my own practice to work.
Wow.
Because it wasn't working in the way that I want to do. So everybody says, leave being an associate and go and do your own thing because you're going to get your own way about it. And maybe I'm not buying a pre-existing practice, but this is the downside to it, is they've already got their own culture, they've already got their own beliefs. So you have to be strong enough and be clear enough to know what you're going to do.
No, it's interesting you say that, because I actually felt like that at a certain point, even in the squat. So even with the startup, you still get the choice of building your own team. However, in the first instance, you don't know how to build a team when you're very first starting out. And then you've got to go through that learning phase still. So sometimes you might end up with a team who still aren't aligned entirely to your vision. And, I went through that stage to a certain extent right in the very early days, definitely not now, but where I just didn't enjoy it. And it was just the people in the business weren't the right people.
It's a drain though, isn't it?
It's a drain, it's tiring, it's exhausting, it plays on your mind. The practice doesn't do as well as what it should be because of that. And it was instant relief. Once those people were gone from the business, it was like, wow.
And the funny thing is, you might have a team of 10 people, and it might be just one person bringing that energy down. And everybody says it, when that one person goes, there's like a weight lifted off everybody's shoulders, and the whole vibe is completely different.
It's a really interesting concept. I would love to, if somebody was able to evaluate on a productivity and on a financial level, the effect of one rotten apple within a business. Because I can guarantee it will be significant.
Well, I mean, if you measure your KPIs generally, you'll see that, okay, that this is what the revenue is, this is what the place is, this is what the team retention is, and so on. And actually, you'll see what it's like on a certain few months before that person left, and probably the magic number is 2 months, 3 months afterwards, and you'll see the difference. So you can track, but it's really it's an interesting concept, isn't it? And I think also when we started off, there wasn't things like what you do. There wasn't business management courses in dentistry. There wasn't any of that. You sort of just learned from whatever the old people, the old practice owners used to do, or people might have, and uncles telling you that this is what they might have done beforehand. Whereas I think people are fortunate now. There are these resources around. There's podcasts around. There's the webinars and all these sort of things where you can learn a lot of these things. But although there's no quite, there's not the same test as going in there and delivering it yourself and going through it and making your own mistakes and learning from it.
100%. You have to go through a certain amount of pain yourself. No matter how much anybody can help you, nothing will ever be perfect, no matter what. And there has to be a certain element of, you go through your own mistakes, you learn, you adapt, because nothing's always rosy from day one.
But isn't that the exciting part of it?
That's the exciting part. Going into the unknown.
Yeah.
That's the most exciting part. It's just, I don't know what's going to happen next. And if we had certainty about everything that was coming, life would be very boring. If we just knew that everything was going to be perfect, it would be like, well, where's the challenge in life? What will we do next? We're not going to be growing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, a question I've got is, for your first practice, what the hell made you want to go and buy a 7 surgery practice? So most people are going to be thinking, they're going to practice ownership, first time ever doing this, maybe a 2-3 surgery practice, something small, manageable, we can kind of learn, grow, but you just went all in.
Went all in, so, I mean, to be honest, the main reason, my main rationale, my main plan really was, I'd just done this implant MSc, and implants at that point were still, still progressing. Not lots of practices had somebody placing implants. Shrina had just done an endodontics MSc, so at those sort of either higher end or dentists with special interest services, what I needed was a patient base, and that's what so when I was looking at different accounts for different practices, and even now when I look at different accounts for different practices, what I look for is what are the opportunities. And for me, that my main opportunity was if there's a big patient base that are not doing with the stuff that I wanting to implement, then I'll have an immediate, internal referral base, and that's how I'll grow the revenue from that place. So that's why we were always looking. Probably, the 7th surgery was a big beast to take over, but we were always looking for sort of 4 or 5 surgeries plus to sort of bring it into, and have there was always the case where both of us could go in there, or I could just go. But in this instance, it was only me that went into Oxford House, and I was working there.
So you kind of answered my next question within that, but you can elaborate on it a bit more.
Yeah.
So did you ever think about setting up a squat at that point, or was it just...
Not at all. No. And again, I think at that point, there wasn't very many squat practices that were setting up, certainly around our area. And there wasn't, I didn't have that much knowledge of squat practices in and around happening. So no, I think the probably more ignorance than anything else was the way you go into it is buying an established practice, looking at the cash flow, the numbers, putting in there what your loan's going to look like, and putting in there what you think you can add to value wise for that practice. And that was just the way it was done, to be honest. No,
I agree with that. I mean, even back in the early days of my career, it wasn't really something that was talked about much, and I don't think many people were doing it. But I think when the regulations changed off the back of COVID, with planning especially, I think that's when there was a big boom off the back of COVID over the last 3 or 4 years. People were doing it, and it's been a lot easier because there's a lot less regulation in terms of taking over buildings and whatnot. So I think that's contributed towards the spike. So next question would be, now in today's age, even though you're continuing to buy practices, would you consider setting up a squat?
So I think I get really excited with the thought of it. And the reason being is the downside to existing practices is that, especially the ones we bought, they're all generally old buildings. They're normally houses that were converted, and the living room's a surgery now, or living room's a waiting room now, and the kitchen's a surgery, and these sort of things. And the one thing that often frustrates me is, there's almost a level of compromise to the ideal patient journey. So if you have we have a TCO driven journey in a lot of the practices, or really want a TCO driven journey in a lot of the practices. And to the extent where, for example, in Oxford House, we've got a little bit of land there, really big car park. And actually during COVID, I ended up, building a separate room outside for, a consultation hub, because it just the limits of the practice, and it's a big building, but the limits of the practice didn't allow for that flow. And again, that's a compromise. The idea is you go into the main building and you're having your journey, straight away, and the patient's led into that consultation room, and you're doing your photo scanning and these sort of things.
You're having to work within the limitations of what you've bought.
Exactly that, And we've got other practices where literally you couldn't fit anything in there, and I don't own necessarily the land as well, so I can't build onto that. So I think I love the idea of building a squat practice so I can just implement the perfect patient journey, and that have the perfect layout of the place, even from where the decon room is, and where the team members are moving around with their instruments clean, little things like that which you'll spot, and you want it to be perfect. So I think I like the idea of that. I think the level at where we are is that, and this is my personal belief, and I really hope that you'll completely contradict what I say, but I feel that sometimes with the squat practice you really need a clinical driver there, or a driver there, somebody who's really going to push that journey and be on site. It might not have to be all the time, but a lot of the time to make it really work, and you see, and I feel like if you don't necessarily have that person or people there, then sometimes it can be a slower grow. And for me, I guess that slow growth is something that I'm not that interested in. I'd like to, I guess I know what I know in terms of existing practices, seeing potential in there, changing the way they do things. We've now got lots of systems and processes where we know what works in certain areas. We've got a big marketing team and a marketing machine, you know, and how we go about it. So I think I know what works with the pre-existing ones, and I know that I can roll that into pretty much day one.
Yeah.
You know, not allowing for, you know, nature or whatever else to go and take it. Whereas with the squat practice, I feel like you need that drive. You know, you need somebody on site to really make it flow. And that's the bit that probably worries me.
Yeah, I would absolutely back that up 100%. So the most successful squat practices that I've seen within our own community, even outside of our own community, are all 100% driven by a main clinical lead. So generally the principal who owns that practice, generally they're doing a lot of the high value work within that practice, and they are the biggest growth driver within that practice. So their hands are dirty, they're on the floor, they're building the team, building the practice, the systems, and doing a lot of the, you know, the high end treatment from day one. And some of them often have, you know, social media presence, you know, prior to that, which helps boost the practice massively. So I fully understand it from that point of view. And I think that, you know, to set a squat up to be fully associate led from day one is a huge risk.
I'm glad you say because I mean there are people that are doing it.
There are
around it, and you know I think it's, if you've got all these systems and processes, and really you got patients from day one, and then you can have, you know, the associate team in there and the hygienist and have that flow going quickly, then great. But ultimately, you know, you've got a loan to pay from sometimes day one. You might have a bit of a holiday period, but really soon afterwards, right? You've got wages to pay, you've got everything else going in there. And I do get the converse part, right? So let's say you're an associate and you're buying this squat practice. You've also got your own bills to pay. You know, you might have your mortgage, you might have kids at that point, you might not, but school fees, everything else. You've got to get food on your table. And, you know, in general, you know, a lot of associates are doing really, really well financially. So then to have that risk of going all in to something that doesn't have any patients and doesn't, you know, or is a growing thing, and you're going to take a bit of time to generate that same revenue is risky, right? And I see a lot of people do, you know, put one foot into the associate pie and one foot into the ownership pie. But the true thing is, you know, if you really want to make the squat work, you got to go in there, right?
You got to go all in. You got to go all in.
I've got a question for you though. How do you find comfort? How do you get the comfort to be able to go all in?
So I think it's a little bit biased in my opinion because we have squat success. So we've got our own community. So we have a massive support network of dentists who are all doing it, and they're all proving it. So there is a pure evidence base there that if you just do this in the correct way, it will work. You don't have to worry, and we've got your back. If you're, you know, starting up from scratch and you don't have that community, there is a huge amount of fear in your head. So what I see is this is one of the biggest things that holds dentists back from going into practice ownership, setting up squats. I have so many conversations and it's like, yeah, Bobby, I'd love to set up a squat. I feel like, you know, I'm a bit of an entrepreneur and I've got a bit of drive. The biggest thing that's holding me back is, am I going to get patients through my door from day one? And, you know, can I go all in? You know, will I be able to afford it and whatnot? And the answer is, for me, is that once you make that commitment in your head, you will just go and make it work. So if your head is all in, you will just find a way and you will find a path. You will go and find the right people to help you and support you and get guidance. Unfortunately, there are some people who do that and it doesn't work out. But often when I have conversations with those dentists, they didn't get the right advice, which is the sad thing. You know, they went to not the right people, didn't go to the right companies, and, you know, eventually it hasn't worked out for them. So there is that risk there. And I think people hang on to those stories more than the successful ones. And I think that lingers in the back of people's heads. And, you know, what we're doing is we're building that community so strong that, you know, if you're in, you know, we haven't had a failed practice. We don't have anybody that's not doing well. You know, from day one, you know, most of our practices are opening 200-300 patients registered, you know, interested, you know, pre-marketing campaigns. great teams. I went to see one this weekend that just opened in Sheffield,
Right.
and I've helped them for the last year and a half get this place up and running, and it's absolutely incredible. I spent about half an hour just talking to the team away from the owners, just general chit chat, but they didn't actually realise it, but I was just getting a feel for, who are these people,
Right.
how have they hired,
Yeah.
and it was so satisfying
Yeah.
because you could just have that conversation, these guys are going to fly.
Yeah.
But again, they just make that commitment, we're going to go in.
Yeah.
That's it, no holding back.
Yeah.
We'll find a way. We'll find the right people to support us.
I guess that, for our part, what we did, especially for the first few practices, is what if shit really goes wrong?
Yeah.
So what is the absolute worst case scenario?
This is a really great point, because this is one of the biggest conversations we have all the time when somebody has a lot of doubt in their heads with setting up a squat practice. And we break it down exactly like this.
Brilliant.
What is the worst case scenario? So if I took a loan and everything went really pear-shaped, all right, take out my variable costs because I won't have to pay those. If I was left with that loan and I'm going back to being an associate and I'm still making £10,000 to £20,000 a month, would I be able to afford the rent that I'm tied into and the loan that I have, which is typically going to land anywhere from, maybe £2,000 to £5,000, depending on how big it was.
Sure.
And in the majority of cases, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
It's never happened.
No.
But
I think you want those safety factors. So with Shrina and I, she's very much the risk averse person, and she's very much the one that tries to sense check everything. Certainly back then, now she lets me fly with it a little bit more, but certainly back then, that was the case. And sometimes the conversation between her and I was, so I'm in general the person that heads growth, and I'm probably more the risk taker and that sort of thing. Although I'd like to see something driving that risk, but in the same way, it'll be me that will be pushing that part forward, and she'll be the other way and say, look, if it does go really, really wrong, this is how much we'd have to pay. And absolute worst case, we've got zero goodwill, we've got zero everything else, and this is how much we'd have to pay, this is how much we'd have to earn, and this is for how long from it, and this is also what our personal cash flow situation is like, and this is how much we need to live our life, and we might have to get a smaller house or whatever, so and I know it sounds really almost like scaremongering to an extent, but if you know that there is a way out if things go really, really bad, as you say, I've not really heard of really any situation or many situations where things have gone that bad, in that scenario, but this, so there's a way out, and then everything else is in effect a bit of a bonus, like whatever else you're doing from it. And then you can actually just concentrate on, right, let's make a bit of a plan of action. Let's know what the strategy is. Let's know what we're trying to achieve from all of this. Let's have a North Star. Let's have a why, and then make it work. And, and then it starts to fly. But if you've got that one reservation back in you, it's always going to pull you back.
Yeah. You have to bash that self-doubt out of you. I mean, I spend a lot of time doing that within squat success. Is helping people just get over that small little hurdle. But that ultimately allows you freedom. That will get you to the next level, to where you want to get to. But one of the points I just want to touch upon, what you said there was fantastic, and this is a big thing. I think even if you're buying a practice for the first time, or whether you're setting up a squat, I don't think dentists often put enough time into all the things you just discussed around strategy. So if we're going to purchase or we're going to set up a squat, whatever it is, how much time are we actually putting into setting up that business plan? What is that strategy? What is our North Star? What is our why? Where do we really want to get to? Often it's a conversation of, and I talk about this all the time, Bobby, I found a building on this high street. It looks like a great place for a squat. I'm thinking of setting up a practice. Or I've set a practice that I like. And then you look at the accounts and you think, oh my God.
I think there's two parts to it. I think that why is, it could be from why are you wanting to change from being an associate to being a business owner. I hear it all the time, and, all the Instagram vibes, and it appears that somebody is very successful on there and they might not be, and they're driving a flash car, and all these things. You think, well, I own a practice and suddenly that's the case. For us, definitely, I took, we both took a pay cut when we started getting, and it for a while until we knew our numbers, which is maybe an important part we might discuss later. But it's really important for you to understand why you're doing it. So if it is, I just didn't get autonomy as an associate, you got autonomy now. Fine, cool. Enjoy that part of it, and you can make your own mistakes. You can have your own successes, and that part of it.
Yeah.
But I think also the second part is that can change, and don't be afraid for that why to change, because it will change actually. Especially inevitably, you're sort of buying a practice. You're setting up a practice because you have that entrepreneurial spirit within you. And entrepreneurs, they fail, but they also evolve, and I think that's an important thing. So your why now might not be the same why if you have 2 practices, 3 practices, if you have 2 children, 3 children, or no children, and you want to go and have a different sort of lifestyle with that part of it. So I think that why part can change, and it's okay for that to change. And even if you haven't had a why up until now, figure out that why, because what we found is, again, back to when we had the first few practices, we were just doing it because it was the done thing to do, and having practice, having the practices and owning a business and so on.
Yeah.
Things changed for us when I figured out our why, and I figured out that, Kana Health Group is all about positivity and respect, and trying to push the soft side of things into profitable side of things, right?
Yeah.
And actually, when I figured out that why, I owned the message. I was really confident in telling my team because it was coming from my heart.
Yeah.
It was coming from what I genuinely believe. And actually, if people weren't on board with that, I was quite happy to say, well, we're just aligned. It doesn't make you a bad person. You're just not aligned with what I want this business to be like.
And what made you figure out that why, or was there a specific event or moment? If you don't mind sharing.
No, I definitely don't mind sharing. But I think it wasn't a specific thing. It was a few aspects. So, for example, again, I sort of go back to that first practice, and I said it in another podcast when Payman from Enlighten came over to the practice, and he was, we just wanted to introduce another whitening system. He was there to talk about Enlighten, and then just. He was literally ransacked by all the associates, loads of questions. Why do we want to do it? What's so special about it? All these things that made it absolutely impossible to introduce something new, And it was just this whole negative. And when I say positivity and respect for Kana Health Group, I mean it for patients, for the team members, and for suppliers and partners that we work with. I want to be renowned for those guys that, we don't get the piss taken out of us, but at the same point, I work well with everybody, and everybody who works with us wants to work with us and has a good energy about it. So there's a few aspects of that. And I think there was one day where, like I was saying to you, I sort of came to work and I didn't want to be there. I felt uncomfortable being in my own practice. And at that point, I just said to some of the people that made me feel uncomfortable, I just told them, this is how I feel. It's my business and I'm feeling uncomfortable. I feel the vibe is wrong. I feel the energy is wrong. I don't want this. And what was great for them and great on their part is they didn't realize it. Because maybe innately they were like that. Maybe it's just how they've been. It's a different culture back then. And they were really sad for me to have said that part of it. They weren't, it wasn't a fight. They were upset that I was upset, and that started that process. The next part was during COVID, where we actually had a bit of time out to know our numbers, and we took our time to get to those numbers, and that was mind blowing. And again, something that I suggest to everybody is you've got to know your numbers. You've got to know what your chair is earning. You've got to know how much it costs. I call it BAM, bare ass minimum. What is the bare ass minimum you need to earn to keep that chair and the practice running on that day per surgery? And then you'll be really surprised at how many associates, how many team members are not earning that for that practice, and you're actually paying them to be there, right? And then it's having frank conversations with everybody, like, and it's all the development side of it, okay, do you know what, you can do X, Y, Z to make things better, and you often see that progression. But again, that how many principals have had those conversations with their associates.
Yeah.
You know,
Very few, because they don't know it themselves. That's the biggest problem.
Yeah.
So, it's a really interesting point you said there, because one of the things we've started doing now in part of Squad Success is when associates are coming on board, one of the first conversations we're having is literally about numbers.
Yeah.
And actually getting them to track what they're doing at the moment within their own practices.
Right, yeah.
So they can actually see what they're grossing, what are their trends, what are their conversion rates, on a simple level.
Yeah.
But just to give them some kind of understanding and some kind of KPI analysis,
Yeah.
which will then lead them into when they open their own practices or buy a practice,
Yeah.
they've actually got a little bit of an understanding that we have to track and measure certain things.
Yeah.
So one question I just want to bounce back to you is, when you started looking at all of that, how did you start to learn about the numbers? Because a lot of dentists, well, again, we're not taught.
No, we're not taught. I think we had various business consultants throughout the time. So I think initially we had the likes of Chris Barrow. We now we have a business consultant, which is brilliant, and she's completely non-dental, and it's very surprising, how businesses are the same. You need people in, you need to be selling to them, you need a team that are happy, and you need, you need profit at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So all businesses are very, very similar. All businesses struggle with very, very similar things. But in answer to your question, we did that. We had sort of business consultants run us through it, and then we had an accountant at the time. And again, we'd have the accountant going through it. But the time we really, really learned is when we had a bookkeeper. And external because they're not, part of kind of health. They do bookkeeping for various people. And this is the biggest tip I give to so many people that are not doing it, is just have your monthly P&Ls there, profit and loss, where you see everything, So you see all your line items. You'll see your turnover and spread it into NHS, private, capitation, anything else, even your finance, everything. And then understand what the costs are, from wages to associate fees to materials to light and heat, everything, right?
Yeah.
But look at it and book time to look at. Don't get an email sent to you and it gets put into another folder and it'll be there when the end of year happens. Book dedicated time to look at that and go through it. And if you have, like, for me and Sharina, is 1 hour there, we'll be together with the bookkeeper, we'll talk about it. But we're forced to go and look at it. And what it allows you to do is, it allows you to make decisions so much quicker, spot trends so much quicker than the majority of people who will have their end of year accounts. It's then 6-9 months actually after the end of the year when you're actually getting these accounts, because it's taken a while for the accountant to prepare, or you're getting it just in time for D-Day, and everything's happened. Everything's happened. Well, really, 18 months
it's
ago.
really interesting because obviously I speak to a huge amount of finance brokers as part of the work that we do and helping dentists, but one of the things they say is no matter how much money dental practice owners make, often they run into cash flow problems. And irrespective of whether profitable or not. And that is exactly what you just said. That is the reason why, because there is absolutely no tracking for a lot of practice owners. And they're not seeing month to month what are the trends, what's my tax liability likely to be.
Well, that's I was just going to say that as well. And it's not normal for a P&L to have tax on there, but actually you can get them to put your tax, your likely tax. It gives you a rough indication. And obviously at the end of the year that you'll adjust it, or the accountant will adjust it, whatever. But it gives you a running total, so and this is good for associates when they're first starting up, business owner when they're first starting. You actually know how much money you need to save for the tax man. Because actually all that money that's coming in isn't yours. The tax man takes a healthy chunk of it. So set up a separate account. Don't see that money even come into your account. Put the tax money separately. If you got some surplus at the end, great. That's your spending money. That's your holidays, whatever else it is. But on those P&Ls, just have it. So then you know really that the last line of actually net profit is actually what you have, and minus tax, and you can figure it all out. But also know things. As you sort of grow in practices, you need to have an eye on EBITDA. Whether you grow, whether you don't grow, you need to know what your EBITDA is. You need to have one eye on the future as well.
Yeah.
You know, so you have all of those things, so you're aware of it all.
Yeah, that's exactly the same. Even if you're setting up a squat,
Yeah.
you know, that is something you should still track no matter what.
Yeah.
So you need to benchmark yourself. You need to know where you're heading.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, everybody's looking to exit at some point.
Yeah.
And it's better to have an understanding of that right at the beginning and what are the levers that you can pull to get that bigger value the further on you get within your journey.
Yeah. And that's a key part, is when you are starting that business journey, have an exit in mind. And again, that will change.
Yeah.
You know, but have your, you know, what the plan is in 5 years' time. Have an ideal exit, have whatever else, you know, like have that in mind, so you're working towards something.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. And then with respect to, you know, you said earlier on when you bought your first practice, you took a pay cut.
Yeah.
During the practice acquisition journey, at what point did you think, right, this is financially, it was worth it now?
As in after we'd taken over the
practice?
practice?
After you taken over the practice, or all the way up until this point now.
So what happened, a bit of a backstory is, during COVID, I had a really dodgy eye.
Okay.
And so I've had this problem with my eyes since I was in my 20s, and COVID, it really flared up. And so at that point I realized that, well, my thinking, so it was that bad that I couldn't see the number plate of the car in front of me.
Wow.
But because everything was closed, I thought it's just my glasses. I just needed to change glasses. I went to the optometrist, and they said, no, it's not your glasses. You've got, you know, something else going on. You need to see your specialist. And I knew what it was, but I just didn't realize it had got that bad. But what it made me realize was I need to be in control of my own destiny here. And quite possibly, certainly at that point, I thought, well, my clinical career is going to finish, and it might finish because I'm made to finish rather than on my terms.
Yeah.
So I had this chat with Shrina. I said, look, this is the case. I want it to be on my terms to finish clinically, working clinically. So let's do it. But to make that work, what do I need to do? What do we need to do?
Yeah.
And so, like I said to you, sort of COVID allowed us that time to evaluate what the profit per chair was. And that's when I got to grips with the numbers. Yeah. And that's when I realized that actually to earn maybe the same sort of level I'm earning now and so on, we probably need to grow. We either need to grow the existing businesses or grow the group. And that's actually when Kind of Health Group was developed, because at that point we were just individual practice names. So when it, you know, and I realized at that point that I earned a lot, you know, as an associate, or no, as a principal, being the main dentist in there. But realistically, if I was on an associate salary, it might be 15%, 20% that I was taking home, max.
Yeah.
You know, everything else was being pummeled down. I was carrying this 7 surgery practice on my back, you know, so we had to figure out what we were going to do and how to make it viable. And actually we made it into a referral center, a specialist center, as well as, you know, having a changeover of associates and having people hungry to try and develop the place. And what I did was I loved the educational side of it, and we developed the Kind of Academy, and we had people, we had the ability to upskill our own dentists. But to upskill dentists, you need people that want to upskill.
Yeah.
Right? So when we were hiring now, it was hiring people that want to be there. And I say even in my interviews now, there's loads of associate positions out there, but if you want to join us, you need to want to develop. And you know what? I'll give you all the tools to make it happen.
Yeah.
But you just need to want it. If you want it, it'll happen. You know, and it'll develop. So that was the crux of what we were trying to do. We're like, actually, we need to know the numbers. We need to grow, and then actually make each business profitable in itself. So it's not necessarily the pool of Kind of Health Group that need to be profitable. We need to look at each business and see the KPIs, see what's going on, see what the trends are, and then understand how we can make that individual business profitable.
Yeah. I think it's a great way of the way you framed it, you know, with your eye situation, because there's a lot of people in that situation who would have been distraught and probably would have just buried themselves and.
I was very upset. You know.
Yeah, that was gonna be one of my questions.
Yeah.
So, you know, how did you feel about giving up clinical? Well, obviously you spent, you know, a lot of money doing all your implant training, and then to obviously give it up completely.
Do you know what the hardest thing, Bobs, was? The lack of identity.
Yeah.
You know, go to family events, go to anything, and you know, my parents with massive pride are my
Yeah.
son is a dentist,
Yeah, typical Asian culture.
Absolutely, yeah. Even for me, that's what I am. If I introduce I'm a
Yeah.
dentist. We have this practice. So that loss of identity took me ages to figure out, actually, and probably still sometimes. If I get into a taxi and I'm talking to them and they're asking me, what do you do? I just have dentist, but it took a long time to get over that loss of identity.
Yeah.
And I didn't know where I was because I felt almost embarrassed to say I'm a business owner and we have dental practices, because it's just not the norm, and it's not, it normally is principal owns a practice, and that's how it works.
Yeah.
So it took a long time to figure that part out, and sometimes it was just time, sometimes it's confidence, massive imposter syndrome in that whole process still now. You and I talk about it a lot. But I think that was the hardest part was the loss of identity.
But I think it's going through that journey has kind of helped shape Kana and the group and build what you've built. So it's one of those where it might not have been a great situation, however it's allowed you to build something even greater than what you might have if you stayed trapped in your clinical chair.
Yeah, it sort of forced it. COVID and that situation forced my hand with it. And I don't know whether we would have just carried on going as we were, because I was working in one practice, Sharina was working in the other, and that was life, So again, we went back to what we said at the start. Is it luck or is it, whatever else? But so this sliding doors moments always in life, right? And I think you just got to take of it what you can, and there's definite luck along the way, and there's definite drive along the way.
Yeah, and it's just every decision that you make has a consequence or an impact. It's just knowing how to make those right ones. That's the hardest part.
And don't be afraid to not. Everything we do, even if we have any innovations in the practices, I give everybody the confidence to give it a go. Because what's the worst thing that can happen? Yeah, it might cost a bit of money, but what I want is this sort of feedback loop. Do it, try it, learn from it, and then do it better next time. There's no problem with it. And again, back to the practice ownership stuff, it was risk mitigation. What actually happens when we've got a few practices, we're buying the third one. If we don't increase the revenue, what are the risks associated with, we bought a slightly heavier NHS. Our group is sort of 93% private, but there's a big chunk of that 7% now is it was in one practice of the NHS element. And what do we do with this? This is new to us. How do we make this work? And how, so, and you'll try things, it might not necessarily work, and you just got to evolve, and you've got to learn from it. That's the key thing. You can't bury your head in the sand for too long. Otherwise things will come up to rear.
No, I agree with that, and I think what I get is, from having the conversation with you, is that there's a huge amount of thought that goes into what you do. So the decisions that you make, whether they might be right or wrong, there is a massive thought process, like you're saying about risk mitigation, strategy, assessing numbers in detail. And I think that's fantastic, and that's something that needs to be done more or spoken about more, especially to younger dentists who are going into practice ownership, whether it's a squat, whether it's buying a practice. But there needs to be a huge amount of thought and analysis and speaking to the right people to actually work out, does this data make sense for the strategy, for what we want to build, where we want to go forwards in life.
And don't forget there's all that part. It sounds all doom and gloom and really boring, right? But don't forget to have fun with it as well. So actually the reason you're doing a lot of these things is to enjoy something or try something, and be it on your own terms. So, have that in the back of your mind that actually is really exciting. What I'm going to do now is really exciting. I'm going to try all these different things, and it's mine. It's my baby, and it's going to be due to me. And have on the other side of it, just have everything else there planned and ready. If things don't necessarily work out, but have fun with it. Again, you must see it lots, right? Especially there's almost this sense of buyer's remorse, and we get it all the time when we're purchasing a practice where you really excited, made an offer, accepted. Maybe the Scott practice, you've decided to do it, and you're getting the funding and everything ready, and you found the place, and you're really excited. And then you hit sort of 3 months, 4 months down the line, you think, shit, what happens if? You know, all these things happen.
Yeah.
And then everything.
I think I had that feeling about 3 months after opening.
Really?
Oh yeah, and it was like, oh shit.
And sometimes in our case, the sellers might have the same. Or you know, is it the right time for me to sell? All these sort of things. But you know, ultimately, you've got to go back to why you got into it in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes write it down.
Yeah.
You know, write it down, because when you go back to those things, and even if you go back in a few years' time, it's so valuable to know what you've written and what the plan was, what the idea was.
Yeah.
You know, so.
And I think the whole point, though, just about having fun in general is such an important one.
Yeah.
Because when people start to think about practice ownership and they start thinking about numbers and all the detail, it is really easy to get bogged down in all of it. But you have to actually remember to have fun.
Yeah.
So, you know, like, what I'll say, one of the most enjoyable aspects of, you know, building the squad from scratch is building that team. Like, we have such a laugh. We have so much fun together. Like, it's fun to go into work.
Nice.
Like, you get to a point where once you've got that team, you don't dread it.
Yeah.
You go in, you get on well with your associates, your team members.
Yeah.
You have a laugh. You go out together.
Yeah.
You know, you start enjoying life, and you can have banter, and you know, obviously, professionalism aside, doesn't mean you can't have fun in your day-to-day life.
Absolutely.
You know, and
it's a lonely place, isn't
it? Yeah. You can't take everything too seriously. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's serious, it's business.
Yeah.
You know, you got to make sure things work. However, you got to have some fun along the way.
You've got to, and you can incorporate fun into work generally, right? You can have it. We've got something called the Kana Cup, and literally, so. Manager will rock up at the start of the year in the practices, and there's a Harry Potter sorting hat, and all the houses are put into all the practices are put into houses. So you got 4 houses in each of the practices, and you get points, and you just get points for positivity in this. You do something helpful for somebody, you get Google reviews with names on it. You get you know, you just do something fun within the practice. You do a new initiative, and at the end of a quarter, the marketing team will come there with a prize wheel, and you just get a small prize. You know, it might be like lunch or but you know, if you work in a practice that's having fun, and everybody works bloody hard, don't get me wrong, with whatever you work really hard, but if they're also having fun in there, patients come in, they feel the vibe. This is a cool 100%. Place. Everybody's happy. This is where I want to be.
It rubs off so much. If your team are happy and they're having fun, it rubs off on patients. If your team are miserable and they don't have fun, patients can smell it a mile away. And again, back to probably the you know, the reason of our conversation is when you buy existing practices. You know, just imagine me rocking up with a prize wheel when you've been the same as you've done for 40 years. They're like, what the F is this guy on about, right? He must be smoking something. But actually, when they get involved with it, and when they, you know, and again, sometimes it is that team transition to have people on board with what you're trying to do. But when they're on board with it, then they're there. But initially, see, again, when you're starting a squat practice, you can have that from day one, can't you? And if you've got a few practices, they know your culture straight away. They know what it's about. Probably really easy for recruitment, because it's a really cool place to be a part of. Oh yeah, and that reputation builds really quickly. You know, people will want to work in your practice once that word gets out that you're that type of practice. And I think we probably understand it a little bit more because we came from the same practice where we used to have a lot of fun on the whole.
We did.
Whatever it was, you know, nights out, but even in work, you know, that culture was, you know, everybody used to enjoy it. Everybody used to love coming in. There wasn't that day where you'd think, oh, can't be asked to come in today.
You're working with your friends as well, you know. And that side of it, just a positive environment, makes a massive difference.
Yeah, massively. And we touched upon it a little bit earlier, Kaival, but a massive thing in dentistry at the moment is obviously recruitment of dentists, and a lot of practices say that they struggle with recruitment. We've been recruiting for an associate position, and we've been inundated with CVs. But you know, both times we've tried to recruit, but I still hear it and see it a lot that dentists can't find other good dentists out there. How do you manage that to build your practices, and how do you get good associates?
If I'm honest, and touch wood, we've had a really good run of it. But I think for us, the benefits of working with us, one is the educational part. So again, it's finding the right people that want to work and you know, develop themselves. So we've got the academy. but we also, as well as the academy, we just have things for our own kind of health group dentists. So we'll every quarter, 4 or 5 months, we'll have something clinical, something non-clinical, and a social. And we'll get people together, and we have a million WhatsApp groups. We've got one group which is just for dentists and the dentists and the specialists, and the one rule in there is don't be a dick. Yeah. So ultimately, younger associates, newer associates, they might have a question about a case or this, that, the other, or anything, right? And there's a safe place to put a question in there. We've got a wonderful team of specialists, clinicians that have been there for a long time. They know their stuff, and they share. And it's that open door policy. We've got some great communicators within the group, and some people that have come in from an environment, maybe a very heavy NHS environment, these sort of things, and they haven't really had to do that communication. And we want that patient journey. So what we say is, okay, even though you're working in this practice, come to this practice, go and shadow, this dentist, see how they go about things, spend a bit of time with it. And we offer, a really good induction process. I've got a clinical lead dentist now because I'm not clinical anymore. I feel really false giving, good clinical advice, even though I probably can do it a bit. But for that clinical stuff or a patient complaint, that sort of thing, you've got to have that support. So the clinical lead dentist is there, and we're really big on innovation as well, right? So I'll try out everything. We have all the toys going, but now a lot of it will run through the clinical lead to understand whether it's a good thing or not a good thing for the dentist, and we'll pilot it and we'll get it out there. AI is really cool, right? So getting all these sort of things. So I think if you pitch the business in the right way and put yourself in the associate shoes, and put yourself in the associate that you want's shoes. So actually, if you want somebody who's hungry, driven, wants to succeed, wants to develop, then offer all of that. Right?
Well, the way you just pitched it, I want to come and work for you.
And then the final part of that puzzle is have regular communication with them afterwards. So on a yearly basis, we'll meet up with the associates and say, look, what are your plans for this next year? What do you want to get to, and how can I help you get there? So you might have just done an implant course and you want to place 20 implants for a target. Have something tangible, have a number, whatever it is. Let's say 20 implants for the year. Right, how are we going to get you there? Are we going to have marketing there? Are you going to get yourself now out on social media and do FAQs and get some videos? We'll get the marketing team out there to you. And you and I both know, whatever your plan might be for these next 12 months, it's probably not going to be the same in a year, a year or 2 years' time. Things change. And also for us, I'm not scared that if any of our associates wants to buy a practice. In fact, we bought one practice with an associate. We're probably buying another with another associate. So that might be your avenue. But great, I know the back office side of things. I know the structure side of things. Let's find a place where it needs that clinical driver that we were talking about, someone to really push the place forward. And you do that side of it, and let's grow. And then let's grow further together and go from there. So I think the key part for recruitment in any situation is, find out who you want, what sort of people you want there, and put yourself in their shoes, and then offer everything. And if you can't, not everybody's privileged to have a training academy or that, but then form a link with one. So we have people coming to our academy that are from other small groups who have got a link with us, and they might subsidize it, or they might have whatever I don't know what their associations are with it, but they'll provide that opportunity for their associates to go and be able to do it.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. So I think there's one word that just summarizes all of that, and that is culture. Literally, that's what you've built. You've built a culture so strong that it attracts the right type of people that you want within your business. And that culture essentially is built upon looking after other dentists, and looking after them well, supporting their growth, and wanting to see them do better. Here's so many stories about dentists who then want to go and buy a practice or set up a practice and then leave, and then the principal doesn't speak to them for the next 12 months, doesn't pay them. Whereas this is the complete opposite. It's such a different way of thinking, and it's just the way it should be. It should be that we should all help support each other. There's plenty of patients out there for everybody in the UK. There is no shortage.
It goes both ways, right? Like if you've got a good relationship with somebody and you're a good person on the other end of it, then you don't set up next door to your and you don't move all the patients that you've been seeing for this long around it, because to be honest, that's just not on, and it's not on a personal level, not on a karma level, going forward and things like that. So, but at the same point, there's always that room to help each other, and there's always those synergies. That literally is always those synergies.
No, I'm a really strong believer of that. The more good you do, the more good that will come back to you, no matter what. But it works both ways, like you said. Associates again have to be open and honest with their principals and have those discussions. They're brilliant. So we're gonna have to start wrapping up now, Kaival. Sure. So thank you again for coming on.
Thank you.
The hottest day of the year in this little sauna with no air conditioning.
No, it's good. My complexion seems a little better actually.
One of the things that I would love to ask then is, I ask this to pretty much everybody who comes on the podcast.
Okay.
If you have a young associate in front of you and they're thinking of going into practice ownership, what would be your 3 best pieces of advice for them?
3 advice. So I think the first one would be know your numbers, and to be honest, a lot of these are probably going to be what we've discussed. So really get to grips with your numbers. Don't have it at the end of your accounts. I like actually what you said. I'm going to steal that for this. is actually even get to know your numbers before having the business, and have those, have your KPIs. Understand what KPIs you're looking for, and have that from day one. Because it's really you can get a feel of things. You can put your finger in the air and, it feels like that person's not doing this. But you don't know until you have the numbers. And actually, you'd be surprised sometimes what comes out of those numbers. So 100% know your numbers. The second is have that North Star, and have something which you believe in that you're comfortable talking about. So whatever it is, and it doesn't have to be like us with the positivity and respect, but it could be whatever. It could be how you're going to have the practice and what sort of practice it is, and how or what patient base you're going to attract and why you're attracting it. But if you're comfortable having those conversations with your team members and everybody else, and it's just, it doesn't feel like you're hiding anything. It doesn't feel like you're leaving out information. You'll find that your confidence will really grow because it's just from the heart. So know your why, whatever it is, and again, don't be afraid that why might change going forward as well. So reevaluate. And the third thing again is what we've sort of discussed. Is book time on a monthly basis where you strategize and where you review, and book that. So don't just don't just get emails sent to you. Don't send emails out. Book a dedicated hour, 2 hours, whatever it is, and actually review the numbers with, if you've got a business partner, if you've got a business coach, or if you've got, whoever, maybe the practice managers or your practice manager, and just go through that, because life really goes quickly. Dental business owning life goes really, really quickly, and before you know it, 6 months has gone down the line. And you haven't had a chance to reflect, good or bad, on what's going on. And the only thing I'd add to, 2 things I'd add to that meeting that you have with whoever's necessary, is have it clear and as an agenda. So cover the finance part of the business, HR part of the business, the operation side of the business, and have it clear and have it not waffle on. Because normally what happens in those meetings, 1 hour is HR, right? And then the rest of it is, by the way, we've got 5 minutes left. Let's talk about growth. It's gone, finished. So have that, have clear agenda. Maybe sometimes initially have a little stopwatch that rings a bell if you're going to waffling on, into something. And the final part I will say about that is start every meeting with a success, right? So a celebration, whatever it is. It could be the smallest thing, we've got this autoclave fixed, and whatever it is, or this person's passed an exam, or whatever it is. But start every meeting on a positive, because it just lifts the mood of the meeting with whoever you're having with, straight away. So
I love that last point about starting with a win. It's huge, but it just sets the tone, doesn't it?
Sets the tone.
It sets the tone. If you go into that happy, you're excited, we've got to win, everything else is going to have a much better tone of conversation rather than it being negative or dull. And with your last point, again, it's fantastic. And I would take it even one step further for associates. So even if you are an associate and you're still working in practice, you should still do the same. You should still take an hour out a month or 2 hours and actually have a strategy session, even if it's on your own, but analysing your own KPIs, your own metrics, your own strategy, your own growth, even if you're not going to go into practice ownership, just sit down and do some analysis. Are things going the right way? Where do I want to get to in my career? And the principles are applicable. And then you'll find you'll get to wherever you want to get a lot quicker, a lot more direction. No, fantastic. No, thank you for those, Kaival. It's been absolutely brilliant having you here today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
No, so all good. So if anybody wants to find you, reach out or find out more about the Academy, where can they find you?
Yes, so Academy-wise, KanaDentalAcademy.com, and we have all our courses. We have an aesthetic and restorative diploma for dentists. We're just starting courses for therapists and hygienists as well. We probably might look to have a business course coming over next year. And for me, LinkedIn, probably the easiest way. Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, whichever method. Find me on there, and any questions, I'm always happy to help out and learn actually at the same time.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Kaival.
Thanks, Bobby.
Cheers.